Hello again. I'm back today. My hair's getting long. This quarantine's killing me. I don't know. I feel like I look like I'm becoming a caveman or something. Maybe I'll change something up tomorrow. I don't know. But anywho, welcome back to Surviving the Applewhites, part 5, I think. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yes, part 6. This is part 6. Goodness. Surviving the Applewhites. Once again, 3D. Whoopsh, 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 whoopsh. If this wasn't live, I could put it in post. I could put in some sound effects where it go whoopsh, whoopsh, but it doesn't. Anyway, once again, test 60652. This is a level 5.5 book. We're 7 points. I hope everybody is enjoying the story. I know I really am enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it because I'm actually kind of back to learning, like remembering what the story is completely, and I forgot how awesome it is. And so I'm just turning off my old phone, making sure that it doesn't ring or something in the middle of my reading. Got my water bottle here because so if I can wet the old whistle if I need to. But that being said, let's see, when we left, what happened when we left? Let's see, you did okay, notebook, blah, blah. Oh, Jake Semple, he found a fritillary, a spangled fritillary, but it was a mangled spangled fritillary. That's kind of hard to say. Found it. It was on the grill of one of the cars. I think it was on that truck. So, and Edie just does not like this. She's like, she really is independent. She really wanted to be able to say she got all those butterflies. Now Jake helped her. Of all people, Jake. He didn't even do it right. He just found a dead one. She was catching them, photographing them, then setting them free. Speaking of which, we are growing butterflies. We have a butterfly house. We got some butterflies for Stella's birthday, and hopefully once they go into chrysalis, I'll show them. Maybe I'll show them on the next video. That being said, let's begin with our story, Surviving the Applewhites by Stephanie Tolan. Chapter 16. Sitting in the passenger seat of the newly repaired Miata as Randolph Applewhite drove back to Wits End from Treybridge, Jake thought back over the evening. He had gone into the audition with Randolph. When the Miata had pulled up in front of the theater, Jake had been surprised. He'd expected it to be like a movie house, stuck in among the storefronts on one of Treybridge's main streets, but it was a whole separate brick building, surrounded by a manicured lawn. It looked something like a library, Jake had thought, except for the tall square part on the back of the building that Randolph said was the stage house. Columns flanked the double front door, and there was a big red and yellow banner over the door that said Treybridge Little Theater, 56th season, above a pair of masks, one with his mouth turned up and the other with his mouth turned down. They had walked under the banner into a big lobby with a box office on the left side and 3 sets of doors ahead, leading into the auditorium, which Randolph called the house. There were a few people milling around in the lobby when they arrived, and a great many more in the house, scattered in the rows and rows of dark blue plush seats that faced the stage. A kind of tense hush came over them when Randolph walked in. A woman in a pale blue silk suit with upswept blonde hair hurried up to talk to him. "I do hope you're going to be finishing up tonight," she said. "Our people are getting a little restive, I'm afraid." Jake didn't know what restive meant, but from the way people treated one another, and him in particular, he figured it must mean hostile. From eavesdropping on their conversations, Jake discovered that everybody who had ever been in a little theater show, and lots of people who hadn't, wanted to get cast or have their children cast in a show directed by a real professional New York director. But auditions had been going on too long, with no sign of when Randolph would announce the cast. There was considerable tension in the air. He heard any number of whispered references to his hair and his eyebrow ring. He wasn't the only target. thinly veiled insults were whispered about a whole lot of other people too, and they sang as they sang or read scenes. When it had been Jake's turn to get up on stage, he had sung 16 going on 17 with Jenny Ning, uh, learned a few dance steps from the old little man who was doing the choreography, danced with Janine Ning, and then read Rolf's big scene with Janine Ning. Janine was a small and slim, with long black hair and dark almond shaped eyes, in a serenely beautiful face. Her singing voice was sensational. Nervous as he'd been, she had such a calm presence that just being on stage with her somehow made him think he could do it. And he could. He had. Even Jake knew he'd been good. Another boy, a red haired and freckled boy who really was 17 going on 18, had also sung and danced and read the part of Rolf. Not with Janine, but with a blonde girl who, when she wasn't auditioning, kept finding ways to mention various other parts she had played in Treybridge Little Theater productions, the first of which she had said 4 or 5 times had been when she was only 5 years old. Jake knew absolutely nothing about theater, but he knew that the blonde girl, however many parts she had played, and however early she had started playing them, couldn't hold a candle to Janine Ning. And the red-haired boy, who seemed to be a pretty good actor, couldn't sing at all. Jake had just managed to finish reading the play before they left for the audition. He didn't think it was as bad as Randolph had said. It was about a family of Austrians, the Von Trapps, and the beginning of the Second World War, when Germany occupied Austria. The Baron von Trapp, an Austrian naval officer whose wife had died, hired a young woman from a nearby convent to be a governess to his 7 children. After the governess had taught all of the children to sing, the Baron fell in love with her. When the Nazis invaded Austria, they demanded that the Baron join the German Navy. Instead, the whole family, including the governess, who had been at the time, or who by that time had become his wife, used their singing at a music festival as a cover to escape over the mountains into Switzerland. Rolf, the part Jake had read for, was a messenger boy who was in love with the oldest Von Trapp daughter. By the end of the play, he had joined the SS, which was the Nazi security force, and was helping the Germans look for the Von Trapps to keep them from escaping. It was Rolf who, because of his love for Liesel, let the family get away. So, Randolph said now as they turned into the driveway at Wits End, it'll be you and Janine doing Rolf and Liesel. You're not a bad actor, and you can dance as much as you'll need to. Plus, you're just tall enough and she's just small enough, so you'll look okay together on stage. The Nings are a talented family. I'm going to use her younger brother to play Kurt. What is that ungodly sound? A wail that reminded Jake of a tornado siren gave way suddenly to deep barking. As they curved around the trees and shrubs, the Miata's headlights picked up an astonishing sight. Winston, tail waving, ears flapping, barking frantically, came running, galloping toward them from the house. When Randolph stopped the car, the dog threw himself at it, leaping at the passenger door, whining and barking. "Keep that bloody beast's claws off my car!" Randolph shouted as Jake opened the door. "What do you suppose is the matter with him?" With an ungainly leap, Winston managed to launch himself from the driveway into Jake's lap, landing like a 10-ton truck, his back claws digging into Jake's legs, his tongue lathering Jake's face with foamy saliva. Right behind him came Cordelia and Sybil. "What have you done to that dog, Jake Semple?" Cordelia was asking as she came, her voice accusing. "He's gone completely berserk. I, Jake couldn't have said even more, even if he'd had anything more to say. He had to close his mouth firmly against the onslaught of Bassett greeting. He started to howl when the two of you drove away," Sybil said, "and he hasn't stopped for 15 seconds since. It's been hours. He has sat on the front porch and howled as if the world were coming to an end." She waved her reading glasses in the air. Jake had the feeling that she wanted that she would have preferred to beat him with them. "I can't think, much less work, with that racket going on. If it isn't the sound of music, it's the wretched sound. I might as well give up writing altogether. Wow, these people are a little bit overdramatic. You can't go away anymore, Cordelia said to Jake. That's all there is to it. Not without Winston. Nothing would make him stop. I offered him liver treats, his favorite, and he looked at me as if I was out of my mind. He was inconsolable. Wherever you go, you have to take Winston with you. What are you going to do about that? Jake's going to be at rehearsals every night. I can't have a dog at rehearsals, Randall said. Under no circumstances will I have a dog at my rehearsals. Then you can't have Jake either, Sybil said. Your choice. If you want Jake in your show, you're going to have Winston. I will not have him here howling like a soul in torment. That's all there is to it. But what if he starts howling at rehearsal? He won't, Edie had joined them. Not if Jake's there, she said. He's gotten into his doggy brain that he's Jake's dog, and that's all there is to it. She frowned at Jake. Alienation of affections, it's called, and people can get sued for it. Not when it's a dog, Cordelia said. Yeah, well, Winston's our dog, and now he thinks he's Jake's dog. Jake had finally succeeded in dislodging Winston from his lap. The dog was now sitting in the drive, staring up at him and wagging his tail so hard that his whole body wagged with it. I didn't do anything. I just fed him a little and I feed him a little and I pet him once in a while. Nobody else seems to take any notice of him at all. I do, Edie said. At least I used to before he turned into your shadow. Now he won't so much as look at me or anybody else except you. Not even with liver treats, Cordelia said. Enough, Randolph said. We will deal with the question of the dogs some other time. Let's go inside. I'm calling a family meeting right now. A family meeting? Everybody? Edie said. Everybody except Destiny. And Hal. I haven't lost touch with reality. Sybil checked her watch. It's nearly 11 o'clock. Lucille and Archie will be asleep by now. Well then, wake them up. Send them that howling monster of a dog over to rouse them out. We need a family celebration. And someone get that Bernstein fellow up here. This involves him, too. If he really intends to do that documentary he's talking about, I have news, wonderful news. I have finally succeeded in casting the show. Aha. So he cast the show. Awesome. Well, that's really good. Sorry about that. Somebody's calling, but we know who Rolf and Liesel are. It looks like he's going to have some other people too. Chapter 17. Whatever. You're kidding. Sybil had just brought in a tray of coffee and set it down with a bang so that the coffee sloshed out of the mugs. Edie thought it was unlikely that her father had dragged everybody to a meeting to make a joke. Zedediah hadn't come. He told her when she went to get him that unless someone was at death's door at that very moment, he saw no reason why whatever it was couldn't perfectly well wait until morning. But Lucille and Archie were there, even though she'd had to wake them. They were sitting blurrily on the couch in their night clothes. Jeremy Bernstein was there, too, complete with notebook and pen. Why would I kid about a thing like this? It's been the most grueling audition process I've ever been through in my life. And the hardest part of it was finding the person to play Maria. And Louise Mabry sings and acts, and she's young and pretty besides. She is absolutely perfect for the part. Well, it will certainly get the show some attention, Sybil said. I don't know that anyone has ever cast an African-American as Maria before. That's because nobody else had to cast a show in Traybridge, North Carolina before. I thought The Sound of Music was a true story, Edie said. Wasn't Maria von Trapp a real person? Of course, her father said, the guiding force behind the Von Trapp family singers. But she wasn't black. Jeremy Bernstein took a cup of coffee off the tray and blotted its bottom with a napkin. Technically speaking, the show is only based on a true story. It's literature, a piece of musical theater, not a documentary. Rogers and Hammerstein probably took some liberties with the truth in creating it. Your father can take a few when casting it. It's called colorblind casting. He turned to Randolph. That's what makes you such an extraordinary director, that you have the courage, the vision, to make such a choice. Oh, by saying that, he's definitely got Randolph's attention. It was the only possible choice, Randolph said. Anna Louise is incredibly talented. She graduated from Northwestern with a degree in musical theater. She's the lead singer in a gospel choir that's toured the country 3 times. If I hadn't located this girl, I'd have had to call the whole project off. There wasn't a single other possible Maria for 100 miles in any direction. She isn't the only colorblind choice, though. It's going to be a rainbow cast. The children playing Louisa and Friedrich are black, and Liesel and Kurt are Vietnamese. Wait a minute, Edie said. I get it that the show isn't a documentary, but won't the audience have trouble understanding it? The Von Trapp children all have the same parents. There's biology to think about. You can't have 3 different races in one family. It doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. It's a musical theater, singing, acting, a little dancing. The kids I cast sing and act better than anyone else in town. Colorblind casting is the right thing to do, Jeremy said. Biology or not, your father is morally bound to cast the best people, regardless of color or ethnic background. Exactly, Randolph said, stirring a heaping spoonful of sugar into his coffee. Anyway, appearances don't count. Once the show gets started, I guarantee that the audience won't notice. Sybil shook her head. Well, they're likely to notice. Jeremy waved his coffee mug in the air. I think it's a philosophically powerful concept. What's the sound of music about, after all? Falling in love and escaping the Nazis, Cordelia said. Jeremy nodded. Escaping the Nazis. What were the Nazis most infamous for? The Holocaust, the killing of 6 million Jews. One of the most terrible examples of racial hatred in modern times. What better way to hold a mirror up to our own prejudices than to cast this particular show across racial lines? It's positively inspired. He began jotting in his notebook. Think of it. Probably the first time the Sound of Music has ever been done this way. And it's being done in the South. This will make a great hook for the TV show. The network people will love it. I can have them come for the opening. Randolph grinned. That's it, of course. I cast the show the way I did for philosophical reasons. That was an outrageous lie, Edie thought, and everyone in the room knew it. But from now on, she knew, and that was how her father would think about it. And that's the way Jeremy would write about it. I told you I would give the show an edge, Cordelia, didn't I? Didn't I? I said I would send the audience away both humming and thinking. Let's hope the little theater board doesn't pull the plug on you and cancel the whole thing, Sybil said. Trowbridge might not be quite ready for this. They wouldn't dare. Lucille stifled a yawn. I think it's wonderful that you finally got your cast, Randolph. I'm sure it will all work out. Never fear, Sybil. There's a shift in consciousness happening these days all over the world. Unity out of diversity. It's surely happening in Trowbridge, too. There's nothing to worry about. In Lucille's view of the world, Edie thought there was never anything to worry about. She looked over at Jake, who was sitting at the end of the couch with Winston draped across his feet. He was staring into space as if he hadn't heard a word that was being said. There was an odd look in his eyes. It reminded her somehow of the look Cordelia got when she started talking about her ballet. We need to be getting back to bed, Lucille said, then nudged Archie, who had fallen asleep where he sat. Let's go. Gavita Swami. And we'll be here bright and early. Who? Randolph asked. Who will be here? Ravi Gavita Swami, my guru. Don't tell me you've forgotten that, too. He's going to be staying in Sweet Gum Cottage. Your guru's coming to stay? Tomorrow? Sybil asked in a horrified voice. Why didn't you warn us? Lucille stood, pulling at Archie's arm. I did warn you. Nobody pays attention to anything around here except their own projects. But I haven't had time to do the grocery shopping yet this week. We won't have enough food again. That's all right. Gavita Swami is fasting. As Edie slipped into sleep later, she was glad she didn't have anything to do with her father's show. She was beginning to have a strong premonition of catastrophe. These people are so harebrained. They invite people over. Nobody listens to anybody else. They're all worried about what they have to do. They're so self-centered, so wrapped up in their own world. Randolph, all he cares about is the sound of music. Edie, the Butterfly Project. Sybil, her book. Destiny, he cares about other people, but he's just crazy. And like I said, I love reading his parts. Although Randolph is kind of fun to read too. Hal, well, heck, Hal's up in his room doing whatever he wants to do. This is great. I love it. Chapter 18. Let me get a little swig of water. I really hope everybody's enjoying this as much as I am. Chapter 18. Jake had finished gelling his hair. Now he turned his face one way and then another so that the light above the mirror picked up the dusting of hair on his upper lip. Darken that down, and he could pass for 17, couldn't he? Not according to the red-haired kid who expected to get cast as Rolf and ended up playing an anonymous soldier instead. It's ridiculous for you to play that part. No way an audience is going to believe you're old enough to get into the SS. What the redhead kid thought didn't count, Jake reminded himself, or what anybody else in the show thought either, for that matter, about anything. Last night, they'd had their first rehearsal, and Randolph had made that very clear at the beginning. The director, he had told the assembled cast, made the decisions starting with casting, and anybody who didn't like those decisions could go do another show somewhere else for some other director. He had directed in theaters all over the country, and he had a smash off-Broadway hit, and he intended to maintain a professional atmosphere at all times. I am a professional, and I will expect every one of you to behave as if you are too. I don't put up with lateness, laziness, or sloppy work. You will not be called to every rehearsal, but when you are called, you will arrive on time and you will be prepared. When you are not actually on stage, you will be silent and respectful of the actors who are on stage. There is no place in a Randolph Applewhite production for amateurs who behave like amateurs. If he hadn't started that way, Jake thought, there might have been open rebellion. There had been so much hostility in the air when they first came in that Winston had gone right underneath the folding chair in the corner and hadn't come out again until it was time to go home. Nobody except the leads had been happy with the casting. The people who'd expected to get the leads were playing unnamed townspeople or nuns or stormtroopers instead. There were so many people in the show that, except for the children, Randolph had to cast almost everyone who had auditioned, but it hadn't made them happy. I've been with the little theater since the building was the Masonic Fellowship Hall, he'd heard one man say, and I've never played anything but a major role. Now he's brought in all these outsiders and given them the plum parts. It's a travesty. There are no small parts, the woman he was talking to said. Only small. Easy for you to say. You have lines. Little Priscilla Montrose didn't even get cast, someone else said. The daughter of the president of the board, and she actually looks the part. After Randolph's speech about professionalism, people quit complaining, but the atmosphere hadn't really changed till rehearsal was over, and he mentioned the possibility of a TV crew would tape some of their work for national television. And why, you ask? Do they wish to focus on the Traybridge Little Theater? Randolph asked. Because we are doing something different, something important, an edgy, innovative, truly American version of a classic of the musical theater. Jake didn't know whether anyone bought the philosophy part, but the prospect of being on national television had settled them right down. Now Winston, who had been whining at the bathroom door, began to scratch to come in. Jake sighed. He opened the door, and Winston waddled in, his tail wagging furiously. Hey, old guy, you don't care whether I look 13 or 17, do you? He asked, rubbing Winston's ears. The dog's long tongue swiped across his hand, leaving a trail of saliva. Jake wiped it off on his pants. Disgusting, he told the dog as he patted his head. That's what you are, disgusting. An hour later, when the family gathered for breakfast at the main house, Lucille's guru joined them. Jake had seen him coming up toward the house from the cottage he was staying in, and couldn't get over the idea that the man was a sort of human version of Winston. He was short and round, dressed in voluminous pants and a long tunic, and moved as he walked the way the dog did, almost as much from side to side as straight ahead. He had the same dark, solemn, almost mournful eyes. In Winston, these were contradicted by a perpetually wagging tail. In Gavita Swami, by a perpetually sunny smile. I am having a cup of tea, he told them, beaming as he settled himself into the chair at the head of the table, so as to join with you for the fellowship. I hope you will not be offended by my fast. Far from being offended, Jake thought, the family was thrilled not to have to share their breakfast. Jeremy Bernstein offered, as he had stared at the single spoonful of scrambled eggs that was left in the bowl when it had been passed to him, to take the grocery list to Treybridge. Archie agreed to lend him his pickup. After breakfast, Jake slipped into the schoolroom, took an empty coffee can and a printout he had made from the internet, and hurried around to Lucille's vegetable garden. Lucille had come in that morning just as he and Winston emerged from the bathroom, complaining loudly that there were caterpillars all over her parsley, eating it down to the stems. She had asked them kindly to leave, and they hadn't gone, she said. That method had worked with slugs and earwigs and even aphids, but the caterpillars had refused to listen to her. She wouldn't use poison and didn't even like to pick them off, because whatever caterpillars started eating, they had to go on eating, or they'd starve. She'd consulted with the nature spirits, and they had had no advice except to relinquish her need for control. So I guess we'll just have to leave the parsley to the caterpillars and do without. So much for the tabbouleh I was planning to make. You can put parsley on the grocery list and get it from the grocery, Archie had suggested. Oh, sure, covered with pesticides and probably genetically altered decides. Lucille's complaints had given Jake an idea. In the garden, he found exactly what he'd been hoping to find. As Lucille had said, the parsley was covered with green and black striped caterpillars. They were busy eating all the leaves. Stem after stem had its caterpillars, some small and newly hatched, others fat and almost ready to pupate. He checked them against the photograph on the printout, just as he thought. They were the larval stage of one of the most beautiful of the Carolina butterflies, the black swallowtail. Black swallowtails had a particular preference for parsley, the printout said. Carefully, he picked up the caterpillars off the parsley plants and put them into the coffee can. Then he picked the rest of the leaves off the parsley plants and put them in with the caterpillars. It wasn't enough to feed them for long. He would add parsley to the grocery list before Bernstein went to town. He hoped if he washed it carefully and the store parsley wouldn't hurt the caterpillars. Back at the schoolroom, he found an empty aquarium that would be just perfect for his plan. Today was Zedediah's day to be the teacher on call. Unlike the rest of the family, Zedediah had a habit of actually showing up. He'd even demand to see what they'd been doing and ask them questions about it. Jake hated Zedediah's days. On his first one, that the old man had asked Jake what gave him joy. Jake hadn't understood the question. You mean, what do I like to do? I mean, Zedediah said, exactly what I said. What gives you joy? Jake hadn't been able to come up with an answer. Once you know that, you will know what you want from an education, and you'll be able to get your own program. Meantime, just do what ED is doing. Every time Zedediah had been on call since then, when he checked out whatever work Jake had done, he'd given him a look that seemed to say that Jake Semple was a screw-up who was never going to amount to anything. ED, of course, never got such a look. At least he'd have something to show Zedediah this time. Not something Ed had thought up. He put the caterpillars on the parsley in the aquarium and added a couple of sticks, propped up against the glass and held in place with lumps of modeling clay. Then he tied a piece of cheesecloth over the top of the aquarium to keep the caterpillars in and lettered a sign that said Metamorphosis, a living demonstration. He taped the sign to the front of the aquarium. This would be an infinitely better teaching opportunity than a paper mache caterpillar and chrysalis. Destiny and all the rest of the family, for that matter, would get to watch the caterpillars pupate and then turn into butterflies. The internet website that had the photo of the black swallowtail caterpillar had advised keeping butterflies inside once they emerged from their pupa state rather than releasing them. That way, they could be cared for and guarded all of the way through the life cycle. More butterflies could be safely raised indoors that way and eventually released to increase their numbers in the world. Butterflies were in trouble, it said, from pesticides and habitat loss. Raising them for release could help. The website gave a recipe for feeding the butterflies once they hatched. They would get to know you and come land in your hand to feed, it said. You could offer a concoction made of soy sauce, Gatorade, and milk, and they would unroll their long straw-like tongues to suck it up. The mixture sounded disgusting, but the website promised that the butterflies uh, would love it, and you could also make a plain sugar syrup, or just put out a piece of ripe melon where they could get to it, and they would feed themselves. He draped newspapers over the aquarium so Ed and Zedediah wouldn't see it the minute they came in, and then sat down at his desk with a book about the Civil War Ed had given him. When Ed came in and began gathering what she had done during the week to show Zedediah, Jake began humming the title song from The Sound of Music. Before she had a chance to react, Zedediah arrived with Destiny, who was loudly yodeling the song about the lonely goatherd. As usual, he was slightly off key. Zedediah, Edie said, making him stop. That's enough now, Zedediah said to Destiny. What's a goatherd? Destiny asked. A boy who takes the goats up to the pastures in the mountains to feed and watches out for them, protects them. And why is he lonely? You'd be lonely too if your only friends were goats, Edie said, as she held the curriculum notebook held out the curriculum notebook to Zedediah. I've checked off everything I've finished. My report on the Battle of Gettysburg is all done. I haven't had a chance to print it out yet. Jeremy's been on the computer a lot. We must let him know that you need your time on it too. Maybe Hal can let him use his sometimes. Zedediah looked over Edie's notebook. Good. I see you've started reading A Midsummer Night's Dream. He turned to Jake. Have you begun it yet? Jake shook his head. I'm reading Hamlet instead because of Cordelia's ballet. He could tell by the look on her face that Edie hadn't read Hamlet yet. Good. He'd actually be ahead of her on something then. How far have you gotten in it? Not that far. It's slow going. I've been taking it with me to rehearsals, but it's hard to concentrate there. I hope you aren't going to let your role in The Sound of Music interfere with your schoolwork. We have an obligation to your grandfather to be sure you do a little learning while you're here, you know? Zedediah was giving him that look again. Was he warning Jake that the show could get snatched away from him like a cigarette or his headphones? We only have rehearsals at night, Jake said. I can read it during the day. Good. I finished the butterfly project, though, Jake said. You can't have, Edie protested. It was already done. Jake went to the aquarium and whisked away the newspapers. This is a different way, a better way to do the teaching opportunity. Destiny can see the whole process of metamorphosis in real life. Edie stared into the aquarium. What are those? She looked more carefully. Black swallowtails? Jake nodded, humming. The lonely goatherd, quietly to himself. Are those worm thingies going to get to be the butterflies? Destiny asked. Jake nodded. And do I get to see them grow their wings? Absolutely. Yay, Jake. Jake smiled at Edie, who glowered at her, back at him. Score 1 for the Delinquent Kid. Yeah, that's the end of chapter 18. Yeah, Edie's kind of really getting annoyed with Jake. Turns out there's a little bit more to him than meets the eye. He's actually trying. I think his hair is starting to probably turn colors back to his natural color. He's in a play, starting to not look like himself or like he thought he should look, like the delinquent. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Well, I hope everybody's enjoying this. Like I said, I really am enjoying getting back into the story. Reading is so much fun. I hope everybody is enjoying reading with me. If there's another book you're reading that you would like to share, please put that down in the comments. If there's something you'd like to say in the comments, maybe after I'm done reading, I will repeat it. I'll say something. So to everybody out there that's been watching me, have a nice evening. I will see you later. I will also say, watch out on my channel. I had a surprise reading today. Went live with a surprise book. I read Amelia Bedelia, or Play Ball Amelia Bedelia. That's worth half a point. Got the test number in the comments for that book. So watch out for that while it's posting. Other than that, you all have a wonderful evening. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell if you haven't, which is somewhere up there. And on that note, I will see you later. Bye.